Hello, everyone, and welcome to From the Ground Up podcast. Thank you guys so much for being here. I do have some substrates available on the website, portcitypythons.com, t-shirts, isopods, all that good stuff. So I'd love for you guys to go check it out. Also, I want to say that I had a great time this weekend in New Orleans at the Herp Show. So thank you to Sean and Lori for taking us out and doing some karaoke, as well as having some fun on the what do you call that, at the French Quarter, as well as seeing Andy Hine at the French Quarter. I was randomly grabbed by someone from behind and kissed on the cheek while I was just walking down randomly, and happened to be Andy Hine, and it was good seeing him because I haven't seen him since Texas. Uh, yeah, so shout out to all those people. Really awesome weekend. Sean has a great show going on, and it's not just about the show. It's really about the people who did it, as well as the people who came to hang out after. And everyone definitely likes to have fun. So once again, thank you guys so much for having me out there. And today's episode, we are back. I mean, I feel like we haven't talked about Morelia in so long, but today we have Casey Cannon. And people know Casey from his work with Bredli, as well as he's gone herping in Australia and lots of really awesome stuff. But let him tell you about that. So Casey Cannon, welcome.
Hey man, what's going on?
Not much. I'm happy you could be here. We met at Carpet Fest, and we had
a
a good time.
Yeah, really good time.
So let me know kind of how you got started in this, reptiles in general.
I think the story is usually pretty similar with everybody. You know, you're a kid who just likes to go outside, likes to look over stuff. I'd be catching just the toads, the five-line skinks, the eastern fence lizards and stuff we have out here in North Georgia. So, I've got stories where my grandmother, when I was like 3 years old, she's like, I know he loves turtles. So I caught an eastern box turtle and washed it with bleach and accidentally killed it because I was going to give it to him, but I didn't want him to get sick. So,
good Lord.
Yeah, that's probably illegal too. So
definitely frowned upon. Hopefully the statute of limitations have been up.
Yeah, this was about 20 years ago. So I hope we're safe here.
So what was the first animal that you kept in captivity?
I had a red-eared slider for about 9 years, from like late elementary school into end of high school. So that was really my first. That was my first reptile that we actually like bought from a pet store. I had, toads and stuff that I kept for a little while as a little kid, but that's just something you'd have and you'd look at and you'd let go. So I had a red-eared slider as my first reptile.
I know like so many people have had, at least growing up, or at least when we grew up, when you have like a local pet store that had a bunch of reptiles and that really got you interested in it. Did you happen to have a local pet store like that?
We had a pet store. It was called Noah's Ark Pet Store. I only went over there a couple of times. It wasn't like a monumental thing to me, but I don't know. When I was in probably fourth grade, my grandfather said, okay, we'll go to the pet store and I'll get you any pets you want. And I think my mom said, no birds and no snakes. So I ended up getting a little baby turtle, which is honestly one of the worst things you can get. Like, it's probably a step below a Burmese python or an iguana as far as terrible things to get a child.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And when did you take that journey into snakes, even though your mother didn't want you to?
When I went to college, I was not allowed to have snakes ever. I really wanted one. I actually really wanted Bredli from since I was a freshman in high school, when I first saw Justin Julander's website, and he had a picture of Australia, and over the picture of Australia was a pattern of a Bredli's python. So that was really the thing that I saw that really got me into that species to begin with, because I was like, that is the most amazing looking. It looks like a tiger to me. So that's what I really liked, was the tiger stripes, the black, the red, the yellow, or creamish yellow on the stripes.
So you went pretty deep initially. I mean, the fact that you found the website with Morelia on it and Bredli in particular.
I was big into researching stuff, even when I wasn't allowed to keep it. I would be looking up like, okay, let me learn about this animal. These like kinkajous were something I thought were super cool for a long time. I never wanted one as a pet or anything, but I was like mildly obsessed with learning about kinkajous. And then I would learn about, I don't know, like wallabies or anything like that. And I got into looking at snakes and reptiles. So I looked at ball pythons for a little while, and really the morph game of ball pythons was kind of cool to look at, but I never actually dove into it, except for really recently when I got involved with Don Patterson in Canada, which we can talk about later. But really, Australian pythons and Australian snakes in general are really one of the biggest things I liked to look at. I was really obsessed with Morelia actually when I was probably 14 or 15. I didn't get snakes until I was probably 19.
So was that the first snake you got once you got into college?
First snake I ever spent money on was a pair of Bredli's pythons.
Wow. Is there any lineage on those animals? Did you care? Where'd you get them from?
They were LASIK line. I got them from a guy that I know now. I'd rather not say who it was because they were actually mite infested when I got them, which actually ended up saving my collection, to tell you the truth, because when I had that pair of Bredlis that had the mites, I brought them back to my house. And my mom was like, "You were not keeping these. You got to get rid of them, take them to that reptile show, and sell them off immediately." So I brought it in, and the guy took one look at it and says, "No, dude, I'm not touching these. They have mites." So I had to bring them back and explain to my mom, like, "Oh, I got to treat them. They have mites." So I treated them. I got rid of the mites, and I just kept them after that. So
is there something to, like, when you have to treat an animal for something? I mean, there's just a different emotional connection that you gain with the animal.
Yeah, that was really cool. And that female from that pair, the male was kind of a really, really dark Bredli. But that female is to this day one of the prettiest Bredli's pythons I've ever seen. And I'm so upset that she ended up getting leukemia and dying before I could ever breed her. And I would have loved to have gotten babies from that snake.
Wow. So what did you know keeping one? You said you did a lot of research. So, I mean, how did you come across it and how did you start keeping them? Like, were you correct right off the bat or did you have to adjust?
Oh, no. I hid these things. First way I kept them was in a little shoebox with like one of those pet pad things you get from Petco or PetSmart or something like that, and I hid them under my dorm room bed. And I actually had in my room, I had a baby bearded dragon. I ended up somehow getting a pair of Ackie monitor lizards. I don't really remember how I got a hold of Ackie monitor lizards that I just kept horrible care of. And then I got my Bredli's pythons. And the day I got my Bredli's pythons was the day my smoke alarm in my dorm room went off, like that night. So I had to like hide them and put them under a bunch of towels and stuff like that so that the people that were coming for maintenance wouldn't like find out I had illegal reptiles in my room.
Damn. So Ackies, I mean, same interest as far as like the red and,
yeah, I love Ackies. The story with those is kind of bad. I was cleaning out their cage one day and I had it was a rock or a log. It was something relatively heavy, and I accidentally dropped it, and it landed right on my female Accie's head. So yeah, I was fumbling around. I fell and I heard, and yeah, I sold the male pretty soon after that, and was just I might get some again one day, but that was just so heartbreaking that I was just like, I don't want these right now.
Yeah, man. I think it's a good example for people to know that, like, obviously in the beginning we all made mistakes.
I mean, that's a mistake I could have made now, though. That was just like a fluke thing where I dropped it and she just happened to be right where I dropped it. So
yeah,
that
but
was,
even
that
like
was so heartbreaking. Yeah.
Even just keeping a shoebox underneath your dorm bed and stuff like that. I mean, that's nothing that you're going to post up on a Facebook group and people are going to give you kudos for.
No, not at all. Oh, I'm so glad that I wasn't. I would have never posted something like that on Facebook to begin with, but
right.
Yeah, no, I'm actually in the process right now of trying to upgrade my cages as is because I'm still feeling kind of guilty that I have them in 4x2x2s. So, it's always an evolving thing where you want to just keep making your collection better. So I'm actually going to reach out to Lori Torini pretty soon because she actually seems to know how to make a Bredli's cage better than anybody at this point, if you know who that is.
Yeah, of course. She has some of our animals and she does some of the training videos and stuff with them, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, so at this point, I think she knows how to do it better than anybody. So I'm just going to, I don't know, give her a call or something in the next week or so. Just be like, tell me what to do. You know how to do this better than me.
So you're really getting into, as far as caging and stuff like that. Obviously, you're keeping cages now, but you're also trying to add like some type of enrichment and stuff like that.
I would like to. I'd like to just get more climbing space. I recently had a very large female pass away. She had a spinal tumor. So I've lost 2 Bredlis ever both of which were to cancers, but they were relatively old snakes. So I have an empty 4x2x2 right now. So what I think I want to do for at least a bigger hypo female I have is to cut out the bottom of her cage and cut out the top of the other one so that she has almost a 2-layer cage, so I can have like a warm top area and then a bottom area she can go into that has more hides and more enrichment, and probably really up my shelving and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. You remember those old like animal plastics that had the shelving in it for
Yeah,
Morelia in particular? Like something like that or something more involved?
I don't really know right now. I would like to be, height's really important. I don't really know if substrate's that important. Like, with my blue tongue skinks, I've kind of accidentally gone bioactive, but I don't know if I'm gonna push that for the Bredlis. I do know that Lori's had some interesting observations with having a humid hide box, which is something I've never done and something I've always kind of been like, why would you ever want to do that? And then hearing that every time her Bredlis want to shed, they go into the humid hide box makes me think like they probably like that, and I should probably get some,
Yeah, I mean that's interesting because that's something that we've taken out of our husbandry.
Yeah,
and I feel like back in the day it was more of a thing.
Yeah, people look at it as kind of a newbie thing right now to have a humid hide box, but reality of it is we probably, at least for some species, it's something we probably should have.
Yeah, but I guess it's not as straightforward with Bredli because you think, I mean, center of Australia, or I mean, what's the humidity like where they're from exactly? I guess I don't know.
It's relatively dry over there. There are semi-permanent water sources to permanent water sources, and just recently, I've been I look through pictures of wild Bredlis quite often, and a buddy of mine from Scotland posted up a video of some rangers in, I think it was Kings Canyon or Trafina Gorge or somewhere like that, and it's a bird drinking some water in an area they put up a trail cam, and a Bredlis came out of the water and ate the bird. So I've also seen pictures of a Bredlis eating a wild duck in the water. And then recently, when they had that big heat wave go through Australia, I saw a video of a Bredlis sitting in a pool of water to cool off. Wow. So I actually think they might swim a lot in nature. It's just something I've really just thought about in like the last maybe month or so.
Yeah, I think often we all think about where certain animals are from without necessarily taking in their behaviors. And maybe that's something to think about.
That, and it's something you don't really think about as far as microclimates go, because Bredlis, they're not a desert species per se. Not in the same way that, say, a western diamondback rattlesnake is, or a Gila monster. They basically, when you're driving through the middle of Australia, it will be flat, dry, dusty shrubland, and then you'll hit a dry riverbed or a gorge or something like that, and all of a sudden, just straight down that riverbed is like a forest with a lot of vines, a lot of branches, and the canyons. The shaded areas of the canyons, I have a picture that I took when I was there, where the top of the canyon was completely arid. There was no plant life at all. And then you get into the bottom of the canyon, and it's full of cycads, it's full of eucalyptus trees, it's full of ferns. So literally, a Bredlis is like it's like a forest animal that just got stuck in an area that keeps getting more and more arid. Because Morelia and carpets in general, they're very much forest animals. They need that to survive. They're not like a blue tongue skink or like a dwarf monitor or a bearded dragon. They have to have at least semi-permanent water sources and areas to hide, areas to climb. So they need birds, mammals, trees, and water. So if you don't have those, you have no carpet pythons.
So what do you do in captivity to, I mean, obviously there's only so much you could do, but what are you doing to provide some of those things?
I mean, really, I just feed them whenever they need to be fed. So
right.
I do give them, like I said, I'm using 4x2x2 cages right now, but I'm really wanting to upgrade that a little bit so they can have more room to climb, because when I first was getting into Brettles, I bought a couple of adults that were they were fat and overfed, so they never climbed much. So I just thought that was normal. And now that I've got ones that I'm raising from babies that are in my opinion, much better shape. They're not fed anywhere near as much, and they're so much more active than those fat adults that I first got. I don't even know how long I've been keeping Brettles now at this point, maybe 7 years. So,
is there any like feeding schedule that is run of the mill right now, or is that's best practice?
So what I do with my females is I only feed them like once a month or so, and then in the wintertime I give them a pretty significant cool down period in the wintertime at night. So I don't feed. Usually my last meals are in like right before the beginning of October, and then I start cooling down like a lot early November. So they don't eat there, and then they eat maybe one really big meal in the middle of January. And then it's kind of sparing. Like I just fed 2 of my adult females last night. I have one girl that I'm thinking is she's starting the process of having a prelay, I think. So hopefully sometime in the next, 3-4 weeks, she sheds. But I fed the other, I'm trying 3 females this year. It'll be my biggest year for breeding Brettles so far.
And they're pretty unique. I mean, as far as Morelia go, obviously you're pairing them up in the spring, or
yeah, I am pairing them up. Well, I usually when I cool things down, I keep them together the entire time, but I don't see any breeding activity at all. Typically, until I have fed my females one big meal during. So, like maybe around Christmas time, I will let the temperatures warm back up, and then early January, I'll give them a mouse. And then a few weeks after that, once their digestive system is kind of up and running again, I'll hit them with a huge meal. And then after they have that huge meal, they shed. And then with that shed, that seems to be the thing that really triggers the males to want to breed with them. So maybe the pheromones start coming out.
And between, all the people that are working with Bredli, I know this had to have been some type of puzzle that was solved. Wasn't as straightforward as you just explained it. So, how did you first figure it out? Because now it seems like you've got it sewed down. But how did you get to that point?
So when I first tried Brettles, I got you bring in an adult male and an adult female that aren't acclimated to your room at all. And I looked at their wild temperatures, which is a terrible idea with this species, because I saw that, okay, daytime's 60, nighttime's 40. And I did that. So, and they survived. So I would literally have them in a container and put them outside during the day so they could get down to 60. And then sometimes I'd leave them overnight if it was down to the 40s. And I got both of them sick, but not so sick that they died.
Yeah.
Which, that for a python, that's amazing. Can you imagine doing something like that to a ball python or a jungle carpet python? So I was stupid. That first, I wouldn't even call it an attempt, because that was just completely botching, and that was a bad deal.
So do they need a warm up during that cooling period? Is that essential?
Yes, they need to be warm during the day. You need to let them get a couple. Usually what I'll do is I'll let the lights turn on for about 8 hours during the day in the wintertime, just to whatever. I use light bulbs and I use radiant heat panels. So the radiant heat panels will be set to 88 and the light bulb just turns on. So, they can probably get up to about 95. Not that they really hang out at 95 for more than a split second, but sometimes you'll kind of see them kind of huddled around the circle where the light bulb is, but they're never directly under it unless they're really just beginning to warm up. But I would say I had some conversations with Nick Mutton when I was really trying to breed some stuff. And then I would also listen to some episodes of NPR with some of the Diamond Python guys. So I learned a lot from the Diamond Python guys. So my first successful clutch was about 3 or 4 years ago. And that was, I kind of had to come up with my own method because I live in North Georgia versus some of these other guys that live like you would up north where it's colder and it's easier for you to actually get a room down to 55 or 60. It's actually kind of a trick for me to do it down here. So I adopted my container locking way, but did it the right way, where I would literally take them out of their container or their cage at night, lock them in these containers, and then put them up against a window that was, depending on how cold it was at night, would be either slightly cracked, or sometimes I just put them on because it's in a basement, a cement floor, which can get down to the mid 50s. So I would do that and then literally take them back during the daytime.
So it's not something that has to be exact, but it definitely shouldn't be 40 degrees.
I mean, I brought them down to 40 degrees. It doesn't hurt them as long as they can warm back up. I temp gun. The lowest I think I've ever temp gun doing that method was 45, and that was a mistake. Basically, the weatherman thought the weather was going to get a certain, he didn't think it was going to get that cold, but then something happened. It just got really cold for like a couple hours before the sun came up. So I went downstairs and was like, oh my gosh, these things are way too cold. But I mean, they were fine. I got eggs that year.
Wow. So I mean, I know most people are probably pretty nervous about putting their python down that much. Have you had, besides that first year, I mean, any ill effects?
I mean, I had a little bit of hiccups that first year, but not really. I got my stuff pretty cold this year, and I've had no issues at all, other than losing the one female to the spinal tumor, which had nothing to do with temperatures at all.
Yeah, and what's the general breeding age and size?
If it depends on who you ask. I have never been able to get a female less than 5 years old to breed. I have gotten a 2.5-year-old male to breed. Nick Button told me that 3.5 for both is kind of what he's noticed. Like, he can't get a male to breed at 3.5 or a female to breed at less than 3.5. My buddy Ralph Polinsky has gotten a pair to breed at 2.5. And I know some people, especially with some of these more well-established lines, I think, can get a male to breed at 18 months. I have not done that personally, though, but I've definitely seen people having success with that, or at least breeding with that. I don't know if they ever gotten an actual clutch from a young male like that.
So, as far as the females go, is there a typical time as far as putting them together, that ovulation, all that happens?
Seems to be a little bit different it depends on the individual female. Like I said, right now I think I saw an ovulation a couple of weeks ago, which would put her having eggs maybe end of April. But my Hypo girl, which I bred last year, I got eggs on the 4th of July. So there's a little bit of a spectrum there. My first, the big stonewash girl that died that I was telling you about, she would typically lay eggs around the last week of April, maybe first week of May. So I would get clutches of Bredli hatching when a lot of people were getting eggs on the ground. So that was kind of a cool thing for a lot of my females, is they would breed way earlier than a lot of people's would. I think Austin Warwick is also a guy that's getting stuff in, I want to say like late June is kind of what I've seen on his end, but I
guess it kind of, as far as your climate goes, I mean, you're talking about the other Bredli guys are all the way up there in like Austin, Texas.
Austin's in Texas, Georgia. So he and I are like the only guys really doing this in the South. Really, there's a couple other guys, but a lot of those guys, like Nick's up in Washington, Ralph Polinsky, good friend of mine. He's up in Chicago. There's Owen. He's over in Pennsylvania by you, where it's easier to get things cold. With me, I cannot guarantee that I'm going to have cold weather in January. This year I had blue-tongue skinks come out of brumation because it was like 75 degrees on Christmas. Wow. So,
yeah, I mean, even here in the Northeast, it was super mild of a winter.
Yeah. A warm up on Christmas seems to be something that consistently happens down here. So I always try to fight that a little bit and just start cooling things down when nights start getting into the 50s, which is usually in late October to early November.
Does having the male in there during that whole cool down period, I mean, does that help you at least not miss, your window of opportunity with them? Because like say a random spike of temperature happens and maybe the female's triggered to do something. I mean, does it just up your possibilities having the male in there that whole time?
Probably not. Like I said, I think the biggest trigger is the shed. Like there's definitely, you need to get them cold. Maybe not as cold as I get them. I think I do a little bit overkill, but what I do works, so I'm not going to really change it. But I really think the pre-winter or the post-winter shed is what really triggers the males to want to breed, because I've never seen them breed if that didn't happen.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean with colubrids, you may have an off day where it's too warm and then you see like an animal shed or something, and then you're all nervous that, maybe
you might miss it.
Yeah, maybe a process is happening that you don't want to happen, type of thing.
Yeah. I had that with my. This is the first year I've tried to breed blue-tongued skinks, which has really been my focus more this year. And like I said, we had that warm spike around Christmas time for like a week and a half or so. And the animals that I originally had at like 54 to 52 degrees suddenly were at like the mid 60s, and they're like looking around like, dude, we're ready to go. So
yeah, remind me to talk about blue-tongued skinks later.
Yeah, we'll do that.
The females, forget what I was going to say, but the females, can they breed every single year?
Probably. I kind of want to do. I want to get a group big enough that I can, and this is kind of with all species I'm working with, where I can have like, say I have like blue team, red team, and purple team, where like this year blue team goes, and then the cycle starts, and red team, purple team, and kind of keeps going. So I'm not breeding things year in and year out. Right now I've bred 2 years in a row a couple of times. I don't think I would breed 3 years in a row. And to tell you the truth, 2 years in a row is kind of stressful depending on the animal. That kind of is a general rule for pythons, as a whole.
So do you see any difference in your females? I mean, even just after one clutch, I mean, are they pretty affected?
I mean, after the legs, they look like a deflated balloon, but you can usually get them to bounce back relatively quickly. I didn't really notice a difference in clutch size at all. Like I said, originally I was only breeding my big stonewash girl because she was the only one old enough. So I would be getting, usually I consistently had 19 babies hatch out of her litters. And last year I gave her a year off and let a hypo girl go. And I had, I believe 16 eggs and 13 of them hatched. So I don't know. We'll see this year with the hypo girl. If she even wants to go again. She's so late compared to what I'm used to that it's, I don't even know if she's going to breed yet.
So do you have any other, do you have like a protocol for when a female does look rough after they lay eggs? I mean, do you put up the feed frequency?
I probably would. Yeah. Like I usually try to feed monthly, which seems to work relatively well with an adult female. I feed juveniles and babies a lot more, of course. But yeah, I might give them, say, a bigger meal, or maybe give them a couple more meals after the warm-up. But it seems to, I wouldn't breed 3 years in a row for that reason, because they might be a little bit skinnier that second time around.
Yeah, and is it with Bredli in particular, as far as meals go? I mean, I know that they're a bigger Morelia, but what is an appropriately sized meal, I mean, for a big female?
Big female, I usually do a medium to a large rat. I've considered going over to guinea pigs or rabbits that were really small because I feel like they have less fat. But my girlfriend has told me that she would be very upset with me if I fed guinea pigs or rabbits. So I think I'm going to stick to rats.
And seeing them eat birds, I mean, does that give you any, does that make you want to feed something else?
I mean, quail are pretty easy to get a hold of. And I have fed chicks. Chicks are pretty cheap where I'm at. North Georgia's the chicken capital of the world, so they just have no idea what to do with all these male egg-laying chickens. So they're like 25 cents a pop. So I've definitely done that before. And I kind of think I should start feeding a little more bird stuff, because I think that's a more natural diet. I've only ever seen a picture of them eating birds. Not to say they don't eat, because there's not a lot of pictures of wild Bredli, but of the 2 or 3 pictures I've seen them eating something in the wild, one time was a duck, the other time was like a magpie thing. So,
and I mean, is it a species that is readily? I mean, obviously, you said it's not. I guess probably not seen that much if there's not as many pictures. But are they studied?
I think Richard Shine did a little bit of work with them, and then Graham Gow was the guy that first described them as being a separate species in the early 80s. I believe it was 1981, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I used to know all that stuff, but I've kind of forgotten right now.
No, it's all good. So where, as far as taxonomy goes, were they once a carpet python, or how does that work?
I don't think anybody really went down there to look. I think scientists, or at least ecologists, knew that there was some form of a carpet python-like animal in the area around Alice Springs, but I don't think anybody even formally. I think it was just a footnote before Graham Gow actually came down and did scale counts and did kind of look over the body structure and things like that and said, hey, these are actually pretty distinct. And then I want to say early 2010s, group did a full-on phylogeny of all pythons and boas and found out that, yes, they are closely related to carpet pythons, but they're still divergent by about 10 to 14 million years.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, right. Which actually kind of adds up for right around the time Australia starts becoming hotter and drier. So they kind of got stuck there. And actually quite a few other animals got stuck there. So
I feel like, yeah, that time was like the Morelia apocalypse of taxonomy when scrubs were taken out and bolins and everything was separated. And then, I mean, is it completely incorrect to call it a carpet python, to call Bredli carpet pythons?
So it is incorrect to call them Morelia spilota Bredli. I don't care if you call. I actually think Centralian carpet python's a pretty cool name. That and I think if you can call something like, say, a Moluccan scrub python, you should be able to call a Bredl's python a Centralian carpet. You just need to know there is a species distinction, which is something most of the hobby understands, but there are a few government offices in Australia that will call them Morelia spilota Bredli, which causes a lot of issues talking to some of the Australian keepers who will like pull up when I'm trying to tell them evidence of like, hey, this is scientific papers right here. They're like, well, my government office, where somebody who gets paid minimum wage to write this paper says they're not a species. So, there is a little bit of confusion on the Australian side just because some government people say that they're a spilota, but all the Australians that actually are in the know and are into ecology and biology, they'll all say like, yeah, they're a separate species.
And then I feel like, I mean, people may be confused at the fact that you hear them called so many different things, whether it's Bredl's, Bredli, Centralian. I mean, they're all right?
As long as you don't call them Bredli pythons, which is something I've heard a lot of people call them. And I've actually been told by Scott Eiper that should be pronounced Bredli, just based on how the nomenclature and taxonomy works. So technically we should be calling them Bredli pythons or John Bredl's pythons. But
so I guess we would have to change the way we talk about a lot of species then.
Yeah, exactly. So I do kind of want to start trying to say it the right way, and I was going to try it out, but Bredli sounds kind of weird. So
it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't.
No.
Right now.
I've almost trained myself to say leucistic instead of leucistic, but there's just certain things that just sound so weird to say that it just doesn't feel right,
Yeah, and anything in hobbyist herpetoculture takes at least like 5 years to infiltrate. Whether it's a
of course.
python, Aryan Jaya, that's still happening.
Yeah. So I don't know if Bredli is ever going to catch on. It probably doesn't matter because you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits you guys have as far as if you're into Bredli, is the fact that they're so different. And kind of when you do breed them to other carpet pythons, I feel like you can kind of tell.
I think you can kind of tell. I've seen high percentage Brettles crosses that do look kind of similar, but to me, the thin stripes kind of start going away, and the color's never quite right. And a big thing I've noticed, a lot of people want to make Hypo Brettles Jags because they see pictures of a 1 to 2 year old. And whenever that happens in Australia, somebody just loses their mind and everybody shares a picture like, oh, look how red this little Hypo Brettles Jag is. And you never see a picture of a 3-year-old. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is they kind of turn like a khaki yellow color with age, because you got to think carpet genetics versus Brettles genetics. Carpet genetics say you were born red, and then as you get older, you turn those red colors yellow. And with you add Brettles to the equation, you give them more yellow, or you turn them more red color. You give them more red pigment to turn yellow. So
that, like, it seems like we see these Bredli crosses, and some of them are almost like electric green-ish, like they have a little undertone of that.
Yeah, they definitely have some really cool colors. Don Patterson sent me some Stonewash Brettles Jags to help him move down here, and they don't look anything like you'd expect a Brettles Jag to look like.
Yeah.
But they're like the craziest pastel yellow thing you will ever see in your life. I feel disgusting for having them, but I mean, I have to admit they're kind of cool.
Yeah, I was like, it's so hard to know where you lie as far as beautiful animals are beautiful animals, but you want to see things pure. And I mean, where do you lie, at least, I guess, in your opinion?
I have a weird opinion on that, which is I wish people were more creative with the way they hybridized, if that makes sense. Like, everybody that wants to hybridize Morelia wants to put a Jag to it. But for some reason, nobody ever does anything else. Like, who's trying to make a high percentage zebra diamond python? Or who's trying to make a high percentage diamond zebra python or something like that? Like, I think the Morelia community is so obsessed with Jags, which is so strange to me because there's so many other traits. But I mean, I'm going to admit that the albino Bredli are pretty. I don't think it would be a good thing for them to really become super popular in the States, just because you do eventually get like 88% Brettles hybrids that you can't tell the difference of, and I don't think that would be a good thing. But
yeah, so I guess is it more touchy here just because the doors are closed?
See, I don't know. I feel like the Morelia community in general is moving more towards I feel like we're moving away from morph stuff, which has its benefits and disadvantages, I guess. So I don't really know. I kind of just lost my train of thought with that, but
no, you're good. So mutations obviously do exist now, I guess, in Bredli. So how did that come to be? Obviously, you started out with normals. I mean, were there morphs when you first got into it?
Yeah, stonewashes were they were a thing, but they were something that nobody had. Stripes have been around. Actually, the first ever clutch of Brettles produced in the USA was in 98. Casey Lasik accidentally hatched out some genetic stripes. So genetic stripes in the US are as old as Bredli in the US. And then there's the Hypo, which the Hypo is a little more complicated, because it appears to be about like 4 or 5 different genes playing together to make a Hypo Brettles. But the stonewashes, I tracked down. So first guy to produce stonewashes was BHB, Brian Barczyk. And then, since it's a recessive trait, that means there were a bunch of possets floating around. Brian just happened to hatch them out first in 2009. And then some other people randomly started hatching them out. There was a guy, his name is Nick Stark, which is where Nick Mutton eventually got his animals from. And then there was a guy who had a pair of genetic stripes that actually ended up being a pair of genetic stripes het stonewash, and hatched out these weird looking genetic stripes that nobody knew what they were until recently. We found out, like, oh, turns out a genetic stripe stonewash is like this weird barbed wirey looking thing.
Well, I need to try to find that. I've definitely never seen that.
I'll probably produce some this year. So I feel like we need to have a cool morph combo name with those. I'm thinking barbed wires would be kind of cool, or mosaics or something like that. But
whatever beats the Wookiee ball python.
Ugh. No, man. The banana mystic potion has to be the worst combo name ever.
I mean, it's easy though. I feel like it's going to be easier in Morelia to have cool names because there's not 100 others.
Yeah, exactly. But kind of when Nick was trying to prove out the stonewash thing, I knew it existed. I knew he had proven out it was genetic. But I had also been really, really heavily researching stuff. So I saw that I remember the videos that Brian had done like 6 years before Nick had finally figured out it was a recessive trait. So I called around and was asking like, hey, do you know what happened to these animals? Because I remember in 2009 at Daytona, there were a couple of Hypo Brettles for sale. And I never forgot that. And of course, I was too young to buy. I was in 9th grade in 2009. So, I couldn't afford anything and I wasn't allowed to keep stuff. But I remember seeing on the table Hypo Bredli. So I always wondered where those animals went.
Did it have a price tag on it? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I don't remember at all. I actually didn't see one. They had already sold by the time I had gotten to the show. So I made some phone calls and I tracked down probably the last female stonewash from that original 2009 clutch.
Wow.
And I bought her and I brought her in. I had to slim her down a lot. I fed her nothing but chicks for months because she was so fat. And yeah, I was really, really proud of that because at the time there were probably like 12 or 13 stonewashes in existence. And this kid from Georgia just happened to come out of nowhere and find one. But that was months of work. I had to make a lot of phone calls to eventually track her down.
Do you mind if I ask how much you paid for that first female?
I do mind. I paid about $2,500 for that snake.
All right, that's fair.
Yeah, so I had a pretty decent job. At that point, I was I want to say I was a junior in college, so that was probably more money than I should have spent. But
we've all
at the same
done
time,
that.
I knew she existed, and I mean, it paid out great. I made all that money back and then some over the last couple of years with her. But
that's
yeah.
a big chance to take. I mean, that
was a huge chance to take. Like, I look back on some of the things I bought back in those days, and I'm still crazy, but I had no like confidence to back up that I could even do that. I don't really know why I thought I should do that.
And I mean, I'm sure there weren't many people producing Bredli in the States. I mean, how do we get all these morphs out of such a small gene pool?
I think the small gene pool is how we ended up with the stripe and the stonewash. I actually think at this point, because stonewash actually popped up in the second time in an unrelated bloodline from Casey Lasic's line. So my original female was a Casey Lasic bloodline Bredli's Python, and it popped up in the Hypos actually. And my first ever clutch of Bredli's Pythons happened to also be a first ever. It was a world's first gene combo, where I mixed a male Hypo and the female stonewash, and out of 19 babies, 11 of them were visual stonewash.
Wow.
So yeah, I had some phone calls with Nick Mutton at that point, and so that was really cool. But at the same time, I kind of wish that, I don't want to say I wish it didn't happen, but it was very very interesting when it all did.
Do you think that you were prepared to handle, I mean, all of that? Because I mean, it's hard, especially when you're just in the snake market. Like, you don't know exactly how everything works and how and there's competition and other things that happen. I mean, like, were you just prepared as a whole?
I ended up holding back almost that entire clutch. I still have most of them. So, in my basement right now, yesterday I fed 5 genetics, or 5 stonewash Hypo Bredlis females that should be ready to go in a couple of years, but I'm not going to breed them all at once, of course. I don't really know if I was prepared for that. I don't think anybody could have been, because it's such a long shot, because you breed 2 snakes together and you're like, okay, in 5 years I'm going to make these, and literally the first baby to come out of the egg was something you thought you weren't going to see for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And are they, so they're all recessive? Hypo, stonewash, and genetic stripe?
Okay, so genetic stripe is definitely recessive. I actually think stonewash is a really mild incomplete dominant trait. Because even if some guys will say, like, okay, in the hypos you can tell, I actually think you can tell in the Lasix, and then I've actually bred a high orange European line male from the A4s line, the A4s line, to a Lasix line female, and I can tell with those babies that they're het stonewash. So they're a little bit brighter. They can have a couple of other little markers, especially around the neck. They just look a little bit prettier. So I've kind of accidentally ended up with a bunch of het stonewash because when I was buying Bredli, I had a look that I really liked, and that look just happened to coincide with animals that were het stonewash.
Oh, that's awesome.
The hypo is a little more complicated. I think it's what we figured out is it's probably just a handful of genes playing together to make the look. So sometimes when you hatch out some, they'll be like amazing as babies and darken up, and some of them might not be quite as pretty. And this is when you breed, say, a hypo male to a normal female. You'll hatch out some with babies, and you're like, oh my god, these are going to be the prettiest Bredlis to ever exist, and then they brown out. But some of these ones that are okay looking their entire life. Like, they never get any worse, and they just keep gaining orange and gaining orange and gaining orange. So they look amazing. So there's a very large, there's a spectrum when you breed a hypo to a normal. It's not like a clear incomplete dominant thing.
Gotcha. So even if there's going to be some variation there, even if you have all hets. I mean, there's going to be nice hets and not like some that you can tell, some you can't tell.
Kind of. Right now, what we've kind of come up with for the hypos is to base it off of percentage, at least for babies. So when you breed, say, a normal, like just a pure straight Lasix to a full-blooded hypo, you call them 50% hypo blood, which it works well when they're babies, but as they get older and, say, some of them start to brown out, you can kind of just say, okay, this is just a normal that, you know, has some extra hypo blood in it. And then maybe one in the clutch is going to be amazing. Like, it might actually be prettier than a quote-unquote full-blooded hypo. So I think just selective breeding, just taking, say, those ones and then breeding them back to hypos. I don't know if I would ever call an animal that was less than 50% hypo blood a hypo, just from what I've seen. Because I just think that spectrum's going to get larger and larger and larger every time you breed a hypo to a normal.
Damn, so this is more confusing than I thought.
Yeah, it's pretty confusing. It really is. I wish it was more clear cut, because that would just make things so much easier. If there was a super hypo and, you know, a single gene hypo and everything else was normal, I would love it if it worked that way, because it would make my life so much easier.
Right. And I bet, I mean, it does probably play in the back of your mind, like, hey, some of these brown out, and then it's kind of up to the person who's selling it to label it correctly.
Yeah. Because I've actually let go. You know, there's some people out there, I'll tell them, like, hey, the dad of this was a hypo, but I don't think this one is, and I don't really sell them for anything more than, you know, a normal Bredli. And a couple of those original stonewashes I hatched out that were hypo stonewashed, I actually sold them for, you know, what the price of like a low end stonewash would be, because none of them were very, like, washed out, if that makes sense. Like, sometimes you'll see some stonewashes where like half the body is like just this crazy like scrubbed down look, and then sometimes with stonewashes you'll see it where there's like a couple of white spots behind the back of the head and nothing else.
Right.
So
I mean, it's difficult. Does it get even more difficult when you add that stonewash in there to tell the difference between hypo and not hypo?
Maybe a little bit. Stonewash does act a little bit. It's basically a low grade piebald, if that makes sense. So if you see a piebald ball python, even for one that just has like a little white patch, it's going to have a completely different color and pattern. And it's kind of that way with the stonewash too, where in my opinion, stonewashes are a lot more of like a salmon or a pinkish color. They're a lot brighter than normal Bredli would be. So really, when you get like some animals that inherited a bunch of the hypo genes, and then you add the stonewash gene onto it, you get some really, really pretty animals. Like some of the most intense orangish salmony pink Bredli ever. I I think are going to come out of some selective breeding of the Hypo Stonewash stuff.
That's awesome. And now
Yeah.
I feel like the genetic stripe is kind of the opposite. I feel like they tend to be dark, at least from what I saw.
For the most part, they are. There's a couple of pretty ones. Believe it or not, if you have a genetic stripe that is het stonewash, it's going to be significantly prettier than just a straight genetic stripe. You have to kind of think about it like the prettiest part of a Bredli is going to be the back. And if you put a stripe that goes right through the dorsal or right through the back, you kind of take away every part of it that's going to be pretty.
Mm.
So that's why I think genetic stripes are a little bit darker.
And now, I mean, Bredli typically are red in the front and then black tail, correct?
That's a very common trend with the species. Not all of them do it. I've actually been breeding away from the animals that do that, which is funny because there's so many people that say, "Oh, I love that black tail," and I'm actually trying to get away from it with my own stuff. The one I caught in the wild did not have. It was the same color all the way down, so there was no black on its tail at all.
And does that really exist in the hobby in the United States?
It does. It does. I've got plenty of animals like that. There's kind of a spectrum, and like I said, I'm selecting for it. So whenever I pick out a baby Bredli, so if somebody's hatching out a clutch that I wanted, maybe not so much now. I've kind of slowed down on buying stuff, but like when Austin Warwick produced his, he bred a Paul Harris line female to an Afors line male. I was like first in line to get stuff that wasn't his, or wasn't his holdbacks. So when I looked at it, I looked at kind of how dark it looked like they were going down the tail, along with blushing, kind of what I thought was going to be pretty. Because when Bredli are born as these like brownish gray worms. They're not really the same color as an adult at all, which is incredibly frustrating.
Classic Morelia, though. I mean,
yeah. Well, it's like the opposite, because with the pop ones, they're born orange and then they turn brown with age.
True.
So it's kind of annoying like that. Like I kind of wish that they were the same color, but at the same time, it's kind of part of the fun to figure out what's going to be pretty and what's kind of going to be more average. I don't want to say one's ugly because that's not a good way to put it, but I definitely have a look that I want to try to keep in my collection for future breeding stock.
And is there anything in particular that you can tell is going to turn dark or black or going to turn red?
I kind of look for the babies that are more of a tannish color for my holdbacks. You can kind of you can tell the black outlines on the white stripes pretty much from birth. They do gain black outlines with age. Like even the hypos, an adult hypo is going to have a little bit of black on the back half or so. But I try to look for the ones that don't have as much of that. So somebody that wants to have one with a jet black tail should probably look for more of that.
Right. And now how long does it really take you to see that color change?
They really start lightening up at about a year old. I was really disappointed with a couple of these hypo stonewashes I hatched out, because I hatched out some babies that I was like, you were going to be the prettiest Bredli that has ever existed. And they kind of browned out, but their sisters ended up being what I think is one of the prettiest Bredli to ever exist, and I wasn't so sure about her.
So how does that change what you do in the future? Besides hold everything back.
I mean, I can kind of, the more I've been able to hold stuff back, the more I've been able to learn. The hypo definitely complicates it. So, I don't know. I feel like I've gotten a lot better at picking holdbacks. And right now, the animals that I've been able to pick out from people have turned out pretty nice. So I'm going to breed those together. I'm not really one of those guys that cares about like, oh, I'm going to maintain pure Lasik. I'm going to maintain pure Afors. I like to get pretty stuff from all the lineages and mix them together for genetic diversity. And then also, like say, the Afors have a really, really nice orange. The hypos have reduced black. If you mix them together, sometimes you get some animals that have reduced black and super high orange, and they look amazing. In my opinion, some of the best hypo Bredls are 50% Afors and 50% hypo.
And where do does each morph, does it originate from a particular line?
Stonewash popped up in Casey Lasik's line, and it popped up in the hypo. So it popped up in two, which makes me think that like Stonewash is not super extreme. it would not surprise me if you see like a small percentage of stonewash Bredli in the wild. Genetic stripes popped up in Lasix's line, and then the Hypos are kind of their own bloodline in the U.S. and in Europe.
And do you know how they originally got into the country, or are they actually separate lines, or is it really just stem from a few animals, like the same couple animals?
I know that Lasix animals came from a group of, I think it was 3.2 siblings that he imported from Sweden. I know that Harris's line is a separate line. Paul Harris had a separate line from Germany, which I don't quite know the origins of those. Sometimes Europe, whenever they have something smuggled in, they'll just give it to the next guy with, like, okay, these came in illegally, you're going to jail, and we're going to give your animals to somebody just because we don't want to take care of them. That's kind of the origin of a lot of Australian animals in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Henrik Afors in Sweden has a distinct bloodline. The Hypos are a distinct bloodline, and then there's the Paul Harris, or the Doug Price animals, which there's debate as to whether or not they are actually different from Casey Lasix's animals. Doug Price is a guy based out of California, and they got their animals at roughly the same time. I tend to think that they're the same bloodline. They do look a little bit different. I think Doug Price animals are typically a little bit prettier, and I don't think a genetic stripe has popped out of it. But I mean, if you have pos hets floating around, it's very possible to not have that gene in a pair of animals, you know?
Mm-hmm. So luckily, I mean, it seems like they are seriously distinct lines.
Right. So in a couple of years, I have a project I'm actually really excited about. I don't think anybody but me is going to care about it. I'm going to take some of these Harris to Afors animals that Austin Warwick produced, and I'm going to breed it to a visual stonewashed Hypo to Lasix that might not be necessarily Hypo. So I'm going to make animals with 4 unrelated grandparents. And I'm really excited to make those, but nobody's going to care but me.
No, but that's awesome. I think that anytime we can get towards genetic diversity, I mean, I think that can't hurt.
Yeah, and it would actually be the first time in the U.S. you've ever had Bredli born that did have 4 unrelated grandparents. Or at least, I don't think Bredli have much genetic diversity at all to begin with, but just the idea of these probably have 4 grandparents that aren't, exact like first cousins is kind of cool to me. So I might be a year or 2 away from that.
That's awesome. But I always thought it was funny that, this line, that line, when you're really just inbreeding. I don't know if that's positive or not.
No. I've compared a lot of locality Morelia, a lot of locality animals in general. I don't call it a family tree. I call it a family ladder because it's just sibling.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that never, I think it never works out in the long run, but we'll see.
It works out okay with like an insular species that's they've basically got built-in resistance to inbreeding depression because they've been so inbred. Yeah, exactly. But you take like say a coastal carpet python or an animal from a population with a lot of genetic diversity, and all of a sudden you just make a family ladder for 5 generations. I think you're going to have a problem. I really think the Morelia community is going to have to figure some stuff out in a couple of years, just because I don't see it being good for the animals for us to just keep. I don't like the idea of breeding animals together solely to preserve a proper noun. You know what I mean? Like, I want to keep animals that are from this guy because they're from this guy, and if we're going to lose this bloodline, if we outcross it. But my thoughts are like, you're going to lose that bloodline if you keep breeding them together anyway.
Right, or you're just gonna lose fecundity, or you're gonna lose.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna end up with a bunch of babies with no eyes, but they're all from, Bob Smith line animals from the 80s.
But Bob Smith's a man. I mean,
exactly. Like, who cares what Bob Smith did? And there's some Morelia guys like, oh, shut up, Casey. You don't know what you're talking about. But I really feel like us breeding siblings together for, 7 or 8 generations is not good.
Yeah, I mean, it would tell you. I mean, like, I don't know. I don't want to say common sense because that's not true. But it seems like zoos obviously have a big thing as far as reptiles go, even reptiles and all their other animals, that they keep a stud book. They make sure that they're doing unrelated pairs, all this stuff. Even if they do put related animals together, I heard that they actually don't put them into the breeding program. They'll, donate them somewhere else or just keep them on display and they won't breed them. So it's like, if I would think that they're more educated on the topic. So that's why I would kind of venture to say that they probably have a reason for doing so, and maybe we should.
Yeah, it's so hard too, because you think about like gelatin locality jungles, or even stuff in the US, like some of our Gila monster bloodlines. You want to maintain a locality. I understand that. So that's such a fine line to walk.
Yeah, that's
we're not
true.
going to get any more. We're not going to get any more gelatin jungle carpet pythons. We're not going to get any more Brisbane carpet pythons, most likely. But at the same time, we still risk losing them if we breed siblings together for 12 generations.
Yeah, so I think you can't help but to be a hypocrite, because
totally.
I want there to be gelatin jungles, but I don't want to breed siblings together. You can't really have both, I'm sure, at a certain point.
And I'm a total hypocrite, because I've got plans for, when you're breeding for, recessive mutations, you have to inbreed. It's just a reality of it. So I'm trying to do genetic stripe visual stonewashes this year. There's some inbreeding going on there. But my plan is, once I get some animals in there I like, and I might not even decide if I like the double visual stonewash stripe. I might decide to keep like a couple of genetic stripes, but I will not be breeding those to each other. I'm going to take some of these animals from other bloodlines and putting them in there to make hets.
Yeah, I think it's take it from the corn snake guys. I have animals that have been probably bred back so many different, I have 4 recessive genes in an animal. Think about how many related pairings that took to get there.
Yeah, and then you almost have the benefit in the corn snake world of some of your corn snakes aren't actually pure corn snakes. So there's at least some genetic diversity from like the yellow rat snake that's in there from 5 generations ago.
How dare you? Mine is pure. And to even argue about pure corn snakes is kind of silly.
Yeah. It's silly and everything. Like when you get really down to looking at stuff with a microscope, it's hard, I see both sides of it, I guess, and corn snakes, it's a lot easier to get pure stuff. I can't have corn snakes because I'm in Georgia, so I don't really pay attention to the corn snake market at all. But
yeah, that's I understand why you guys have your laws and stuff, but it kind of sucks that you guys can't keep corns.
Yeah, I'm scared to keep any North American colubrid because I don't actually know the taxonomy enough, and it changes so often. I don't want to realize that I'm breaking the law, because some scientist decides that these animals from Arizona are actually the same species. So, I've heard bad things about DNR in Georgia, catching people with native species. I don't even want to deal with it.
Oh, I'm sure. But like Bredli, the whole dropping them down, would work out for you. But
I feel like I probably in another life would have been a colubrid guy. I'm a cold weather python guy now. Like, I'm fascinated with all the pythons that you need to keep colder than the standard, because I feel like most pythons do just fine with the ball python formula. There's a couple species that just don't, and I'm fascinated with almost all the species that just don't work with that formula.
So off the bat, I'm thinking diamonds and Bredli. Are there other animals, other pythons that are spring breeding, as well as you got to get them dropped down pretty far?
So Stimson's pythons are from the same area that Brittles are. Woma pythons are from the same areas that Brittles are. Actually, Woma pythons are out in the desert, so they're in like the crappy, area that Bredli don't want to go into because it's too hard to live in. Bolins, of course, are a cold weather python species. There's a couple of I would say a couple of the scrub pythons are probably animals that need to be kept a little bit cooler. And then as far as boas go, there's a lot of boas that kind of follow the exact same formula that a Bredlis does. I think I could keep Argentine boas with no problem. I think I could breed any Sanzinia with no problem. So
yeah, and it's so unique to have that in a python. And Do you have any interest, or I haven't really seen people breeding like say womas in the same way that you would. I see them breeding them more like you would a normal carpet, maybe some slight drops. I don't see anyone bringing them down to like 50 degrees. Do they need that?
I don't
At least
know.
I don't think
Like
so.
I know there's
Yeah.
certain lines of womas that people are having a much harder time with than other lines. So I kind of wonder if maybe the womas that people are having problems with might be from an area that needs to get colder. But then womas, their diet is also completely messed up in captivity compared to what it is in the wild. So there's a lot kind of working against womas.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like people don't have as much of a problem breeding them as they do with taking care of the eggs and getting them to hatch.
Yeah. And I mean, I see that with blackheads too. I really think that the problem with blackheads and womas, I don't think anything from Australia is hard to breed in captivity. I think you just need to figure out what to do. So blackheads and womas, I think the issue is the diets are too high in fat. Like you hear stories about blackheads being born with yolks that are so huge they can't even like roll over the right way. That to me just sounds like the mom was fat and she made the yolks too fat. So I think Derek Roddy fed a couple of his nothing but like one or two of his nothing but fish. The babies came out way better than they did being fed rats. So
and natural snake eaters, right?
Oh yeah, natural snake eaters. So I think if you went over to the Asian market and got, some of those freshwater eels they seem to sell pretty often, I would love to get blackheads one day. I've really considered it. I just I've got other stuff that I'm kind of interested in right now before I get in my blackheads.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. Blackhead is definitely like one of my dream animals, but for whatever reason, it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I tried for a little while. There was a guy that wanted to trade some Hypo Brettles for a pair of black-headed pythons, and he reached out to me, he messaged me, and the second he said like, "Hey man, you want these?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I do." And he like flipped a switch. It was so weird. Like I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'll totally trade those for these." And he's like, "Yeah, man, maybe like one day or something. We'll figure it out." I'm like, dude, you asked me.
You said yes too soon. He was like, "Yeah."
I said yes like immediately, and then he turned like from being like, "Yes, we should do this," to absolutely not. I guess he thought I was gonna try to like talk him down or something. But I was like, "Oh yeah, dude, your blackheads look awesome. I'll totally take some."
Damn. Well, no one's going to trade me any blackheads for corn snakes anytime soon, but I would totally take them if that was the case.
Yeah, I know. I still don't quite understand that one. That was one of my weirder like trade offers.
And Ryan in the chat was somewhat messing with you, but he said Casey now has locality ball pythons.
I do have locality ball pythons. You were
talking about ball pythons just before.
Yeah, I'm a total hypocrite with that. I got some locality ball pythons in the Southeast Carpet Fest auction.
I'm not gonna lie, like I have no desire to keep a ball python, but if I did, it would be that.
Which is exactly why I got them. Every carpet guy I feel like I've talked to that I told them I have these is like, yeah, put me on a list, man. I want some.
There's something wrong.
They're like the reptile snob ball python, which is kind of why I think it's so. I find it like kind of hilarious. So
it's like the anti-ball python ball python.
It is. That's what's so cool about them, though. Like I was kind of just giggling to myself as I was driving to the FedEx hub to get them because like this is so stupid, but I'm so glad I had these. Like I was so excited about them.
Yeah, and do you know the whole background with Stephen Tillis and all that?
Yeah, we can go into that a little bit with those guys.
Yeah.
So Stephen Tillis took a trip to Togo about 4 years ago. He went to an area that is very far outside of the normal collection zone for ball pythons. Ball pythons are all kind of collected in this little valley area around some of the major towns and cities in Togo. But there's an area by the Zio River and the Volta region that he visited. And he said when he got to that village that he has GPS coordinates for, by the way, which is kind of what makes these cool. There was a guy there that was a snake catcher that had like a 6'2" female with a head like a small Burmese python. And she was a really old, scarred up, wild caught animal. And he took one look at that thing and was like, I want to take it. What would it take for me to get this? And the guy wanted some of his snake tongs. You know, it was like little snake hooks. So he's like, oh yeah, sure, take them. I want that female. So he got that gigantic female and a male that I don't really know if the male was bigger than normal. But, you know, talking to him, I've talked to a couple of guys about these. Ball python people used to call animals from the Volta region sub-Saharan, which is a dumb name. But the Volta region animals are rumored to get significantly larger, and they have significantly larger heads, and this female did. Now, whether or not that is because there is, you know, selective pressure to become much larger, which is entirely possible, or if it's just that these animals are so far outside of the normal collection zone of ball pythons that females are just able to get 40 years old and gigantic, kind of remains to be said. He did tell me that, you know, he did a lot of looking around in that region, and he saw ball pythons that looked more or less normal, and he saw a couple of animals that looked gigantic. So it's hard to know, but at the same time, if you look at three things can change very quickly in a population, and that is size, color, and pattern. It does not take a lot of generation to change any one of those three things. So if there is even a little bit of a selective pressure for a little bit of that population to become larger, some of them are going to start becoming larger. So,
and why is that in particular? Is there any particular reason why larger individual would survive and all the smaller ones do not?
I don't know, bigger prey. I wouldn't be the guy to ask that. I've never been to Togo. And like I said, there's still a distinct possibility that that's all bull crap, and this female just happens to be 45 years old and got to the point she could eat small rabbits.
True. I mean, you remember those old Volta animals that used to come in?
Yeah, this animal is from the Volta region. He just happens to have exact
region.
Yeah, he happens to have the exact GPS coordinates for where they were collected. So, used to be people would say, like, how do you really know it's a Volta? I know these are Volta. I know for a fact because I have the GPS coordinates. You can go on Google Maps and see the village that he bought them at and where they were collected right outside of.
Yeah, I know they were labeled as like Zio River or something. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's what Stephen Tillis called them, Zio River. Volta animals used to be called sub-Saharan because I guess the Volta region is just below the Sahara Desert. But at the same time, sub-Saharan Africa means anything in Africa below the Sahara Desert, which is like 2/3 of Africa. So yeah. This village is right off the shore of the Zio River in Togo, though, which is a pretty defined area.
Yeah, that's super awesome. And you just have a pair of them?
Yeah, I have 1.1. So yeah, I think it's a cool novelty project. I'm not going to base my whole collection off of it, but it's still super cool to say I have like GPS locality ball pythons that may or may not be this like really cool locality giant type.
Yeah, snake snobs are.
Yeah, exactly. It's the snake snob ball python.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. I wanted to bring up the fact that Benjamin, who is always he's always hanging out with us in the chat here, he said that the Bredli that he got from you are feisty and fantastic.
Yeah, I did sell Benjamin Bredli a couple months ago. Yeah, he was a really good customer to me. So, hey man.
Yeah, it's always funny how experienced snake keepers and breeders have a different point of view when it comes to snakes, meaning like feisty animals for the most part are negative when you're talking to pet owners. When you're talking to someone who is looking to keep an animal for a long period of time or breed an animal, I mean, it's not a negative trait at all.
No, it means they eat. But really even mean Bredli calm down for the most. There's going to be a couple exceptions. There's going to be some animals that are just more high-strung than others. I have noticed that hypos seem to be more high-strung than non-hypos. I don't know why that is. But, oh, yeah, I know Christopher too. Yeah, I sold him a genetic stripe not long ago, and then he bought one of my Hypo to Aphors too, and then I think he has one of my Het Stonewash that I produced. So, yeah, he's got a pretty good, at least as far as bloodlines and stuff go, he's got a pretty good group going.
Yeah, we got all the Bredli people coming out, so I appreciate you sharing it on your page because obviously everyone's showing up for you.
And yeah, I shipped that one out too. I'm reading the chat for the guy saying he has the Hypo to A-Force coming in. So yeah, it's on the way.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I'm guessing it's kind of a similar situation for you where the weather's just starting to break and you're starting to be able to get some animals out.
I've been really lucky. The last two guys that have wanted me to ship out are very close to me. So, I don't think that those are actually going to even be on an airplane, which is a real plus when it comes to weather.
Yeah, and Lori was saying that she found her hypos to be more reactive, but her stonewash are the most mellow.
Yeah, I guess that could be a thing. I noticed the hypos are so much more high strung. But yeah, again, Lori, I think we need to talk about how I need to set up my Bredli's cages. So yeah, we'll talk in a couple of days.
Yeah, man, I look forward to see what people, because I think oftentimes breeders aren't seen as people who are looking to upgrade their husbandry all the time.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something that changes with time. That I would kind of like to start doing some filming stuff, and when you start filming, you're always going to have criticism, but you want to have your collection a little bit less easy to be criticized.
Yes. I mean, part of the changing even on my end is the fact that I know that I do YouTube videos and I want to be able to show enclosures again without people hating me. So
yeah.
I know it's not supposed to affect me, but it would help my YouTube channel if people didn't dislike what they see in the video. It doesn't help to have things that people dislike, and it's also better for the animals. So
yeah, and I was about to say, like, there's probably a benefit to the animals too.
Yeah.
And it gets us back to the idea of keeping a snake in a drawer versus actually being like a private zookeeper is kind of an interesting shift I almost see happening, where you have people that are actually trying to train their animals. You got people that are actually trying to make their cages better. And you've got guys like Lawrence over in Ireland right now, who is really giving his animals, really giving his scrub pythons a lot of options and a lot of enrichment, and it's working for him. That's a group of pythons that's high strung and hard to breed, and he's doing a great job.
Yeah, I never thought of it from that perspective. Private zookeeper. I mean, that is exactly what it's like.
Yeah, that's kind of the shift I see going on. And I have a relatively small collection. And right now I do have an interesting, I have a deal with Don Patterson in Canada where he sends me some stuff. So I'm able to kind of make money from that, from my own collection. So I can kind of keep investing into my cages and into better new projects for animals as well. So
does that work as far as he's in Canada, right? So yes. You're basically just importing them and then you're able to keep them and ship them?
I usually will we kind of have a little two-way street going on for that, but yes, he produces a lot of like mid-range ball pythons, as well as a lot of other really interesting species. He's got a lot of stuff he's trying to breed this year, and I hope he does, because I'll be able to get some, even if he doesn't tell anybody what he's breeding. So that's a really cool partnership I've got. He's somebody I just started talking to maybe a year and a half ago, and has become one of my best friends in the reptile world. I could call that a guy up right now and we'd have an hour and a half long conversation about nothing. So having somebody with that much experience and interest in the reptile hobby from another country has been really cool for me, as far as like a friend and a mentor situation.
And he does it full time, right?
Yes, he does it full time. I'm like a cheating way to being full time too right now. So I kind of do stuff with him, and then I do my own stuff, and then I have a couple of other like small little gigs that I use to make money with, and I'm trying to do some work with Reptiles Express, which is a local company to me. I'm really good friends with both Mikes that work there, Mike Arnold, as well as Mike, the owner. So I've got some stuff going on with them right now to try to do some cool things with them in the future.
Was that always your goal, is to become full-time reptiles?
Kind of. Yeah, I like the idea of being a private zookeeper is kind of cool to me. I like that term, I think.
By any means necessary, however you can make the money, to...
Yeah, I mean, I have a biology degree. I helped out a lot with, say, Project Pine Snake and some grad students and stuff like that. I had professors tell me you have to go to grad school and I would like to, but I also want to make money, because not even from like I want to be greedy, just I have to make
Don't
money
go in
because
debt to make a mediocre salary.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad because obviously it's something, the sciences is such an important field.
Yeah.
And there's too many like biologists who need too much school for way too little money, and you're in a precarious situation.
And I do think you need a lot of education to do it. I was fascinated in a lot of my genetics classes and a lot of my ecology classes, not so much my organic chemistry classes or anything like that. I still think I might like to go to grad school at one point or at some point just to be able to do a project like that. But at the same time, I don't want to make $18,000 a year for 2 years.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, it's a hard way to live.
Yeah, and I see so many people hustling out there just to make it work and moving all over the place, and like so much power to them to do that.
That's the biggest problem. That's a bigger problem to me than the salary, is that I don't see there's a way that I could keep animals and do that. I don't see there's a way that I could maintain any kind of, be it romantic, family, friends, any kind of relationship at all, when to be a biologist at the early levels, you have to move like every 4 months. And it's not an easy move where it's like right down the street. It's like, I need you in Nebraska from, I don't know, October to January. And then after that, you need to go to Washington State. And after that, I need you down in, the Texas-Mexico border or whatever. That's it's a hard way, and it's just something I don't think I can do. I've got friends that do it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of like if you wanted to be full-time in reptiles, you got to make some sacrifices too. They're just different.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't move with reptiles. I mean, you've seen that. You can, but
not at a certain
point.
Not
at a certain point. Yeah, which makes it very difficult. Is I need to get somewhere where I can get at least a good basement. So I need to move pretty soon, but I need to be careful not to let myself get too big. And this deal with Don has really helped me out, where I can keep a smaller collection, but also get a couple of shipments of $800 to $1,000 ball pythons, which I get a percentage of selling a couple times a year.
So if people see something that they're interested in that Don produces, can they hit you up?
Oh yeah, of course. There are a couple of things that I kind of want to have first dibs on. He posted some amazing Amazon tree boas. So if he ever lets those go, and he's not letting them go just yet, you're going to have to go through me to get them. And I'm not going to.
But, so it's not going to come easy.
Yeah, they're not going to come easy because I want them, because I love orange snakes, and he's producing the most like fire engine red and traffic cone orange Amazon tree boas in existence.
Yeah, but I mean, and going back kind of to like the moving thing, it's like not only you need that basement, or you may need
a building.
At a full-time level, you may need a building that's zoned properly. I can't move to Georgia. I can't move right over the bridge. I live in Philly. I can't move over the bridge to Jersey because all my corn snakes are legal that aren't AMLs there. So it's like there are some things that you may not think about beforehand that kind of.
And I didn't. To be honest with you, this would be so much easier in the Carolinas, because Georgia, we have pet dealer license laws. We have laws of things you can keep, even if it's just mildly venomous rear fang stuff. I'm actually shocked we can keep hognose snakes, because everything else that has like roughly that level of toxicity is illegal. So somehow hognose snakes pass that rule.
Do they get down to species, or do they just say like all rear fanged?
No, it's all rear fanged. So I can't keep, like, I've been to some of the South Carolina shows, which are disgusting, but it's cool to get to see some like mildly venomous rear fang stuff, like some of the South and Central American columbrid species that are just mildly venomous. Barron's rat snakes are awesome to me, and if I ever have the ability to keep venomous, I'm getting Gila monsters. I love Gila monsters. I wouldn't keep vipers, I don't think, but like Gila monsters and beetles are just such cool animals, man.
What is it exactly?
Just the way they look, the color, the fact they kind of match along with what I'm already into. Like, I feel like it wouldn't be much of a stretch for me to keep a couple of Gila monsters when I'm keeping Bredli's pythons and blue-tongue skinks.
Mm. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about blue-tongue skinks. I mean, when did you get into those? How are you in the localities, morphs, Australians, Indos, all that good stuff?
Okay, so I've got a pretty small collection of those. I used to think that I was wanting to have like a room full of them because they were amazing and they were in really high demand. But the more I'm keeping them, the more I don't want to do that because they attract flies like nobody's business.
Mm.
Like, you gotta, they eat dog food as a main part of their diet, which is great, except for the fact that if they kind of swish around some wet dog food and a little bit goes in the corner of the cage and you don't see it, the house flies are going to find it, and it is going to be a big issue. So I'm trying to keep more of a locality thing. There are a couple of morph projects I would like to get into. I have New South Wales type Easterns, which we can go into. I think that's a dumb name for them, but that's what the hobby calls them. It's not accurate. I have Key Islands, which are pretty rare Indonesian species that have only been bred in captivity a couple of times. I have a group of 4 of those, and I still have no idea what are boys and what are girls. And then I managed to track down some Western Australia type Western blue-tongue skinks, and those are very rare in the hobby.
That's awesome. So you're gonna have to elaborate more because I don't know anything about blue tongues. So like say Easterns, I mean, why is that technically incorrect?
Okay, so Easterns are basically the coastal carpet python of the blue-tongue skink world. They have the almost same range and locality as coastal carpet pythons. They go all the way up in northern Queensland, and they go further down than diamond pythons do, actually. So they're kind of a hybrid between, as far as range goes, they're kind of a hybrid between coastal carpet pythons and diamond pythons. So they go down into Victoria and over into South Australia because they're a little bit more arid tolerant, a little drier tolerant than a carpet python is. So there's really 3 distinct types of eastern blue-tongue skinks. You have animals in the far north Queensland, which are more of a silvery, grayish charcoal type look. I think those are in the US. I have not found that out for sure. They're a little bit more like the Cape York coastal carpet pythons, if you've seen pictures of those. They're very, very similar. Then you have the Queensland types, which they lack an eye band. They're significantly brighter, and they're a lot bigger. And then you have the black eye band kind, which have a very similar pattern to me to an inland carpet python. So the Brisbane or the South Queensland type blue-tongue skinks look more like a coastal carpet python from the Brisbane area. So the southern types look more like an inland. They kind of have a similar habitat to those animals too. They have a really distinct black band behind their eyes. They are significantly darker, and they have more of a charcoal striping going down their back versus, say, the ones found in South Queensland, which are more of like a tannish to yellowish to orangish color. So in the US, we have, for sure, true locality animals from Victoria and from New South Wales, which TC Houston brought in, who you guys have had on. Those animals are from New Zealand, and there's a few other bloodlines from Europe. But the biggest bloodline of the New South Wales eastern blue-tongue skink are the result of a female that was accidentally smuggled into Europe.
Wait a second.
So no, I'll describe it. It's a really cool story. So there was a company in Australia that was shipping some pipes to England, and the company was based right outside of Sydney. So in those pipes, a female blue-tongue skink just kind of found a cool little place to hide, and she got shipped all the way to Europe. And the company, while they were unloading stuff, found this huge female blue-tongue skink from Sydney. And like, what do we do with this thing? So they got it to a guy named Marcus Webb, who's a big breeder over there, and he bred her to a Queensland type male. So he made some animals that had a very similar look to the like the southern eastern types.
Mm.
So they have the black band, they have a little bit darker color. In my opinion, they're a little bit lighter though. And then those were shipped in a couple of years ago, and that really increased the number of eye-banded blue-tongue skinks. So people in the U.S. call those things New South Wales or eye-bands. I like to call them eye-bands because I can look back on the actual lineage of those animals and tell you that they're 50% Queensland, 50% New South Wales. They're not true. They're not true New South Wales animals.
Right.
But then, like I said, there are also true New South Wales animals. I have a male that I know for a fact is a New South Wales, and then I have I'm going to be getting in a couple of animals that I know are from Victoria, or the Victoria area.
And are those in much more high demand than, say, Indo animals that you can get pretty easily?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Easterns are significantly more expensive than even Northerns. They need colder temperatures, so I'm into them. So while Easterns are maybe more of the coastal carpet python to diamond python equivalent, Northerns, which are the more popular Australian animals, are probably more like the Darwin or the jungle carpet python equivalent. They don't need as cold of temperatures.
That's where you see like those sunsets and the different morphs.
Yes, they're much more common because you're able to breed them with the kind of more typical python cool down regime. They need a higher basking spot, of course, because they're a lizard, but you can still cool them down to 68 to 72 degrees, and they're going to think that they're being cycled and stuff. While my New South Wales type Easterns, I had to cool them down to the low 50s.
Wow.
So
and are all those tricky to breed? Because I feel like I know a whole bunch of people that have them, but not exactly people that are on them over and over again and doing it en masse.
The guys from R&B Reptiles seem to have it pretty well figured out, and I talked to them. I got a couple of animals from them, most notably the male that I managed to breed to my female this year. Came from R&B, so yeah, cool guys. You've had them on. Really, it just seems to be an availability thing. It's just they need a little bit colder temperatures, and people are afraid to take their expensive animals down to colder temperatures.
Right. Yeah, and it was funny having Ryan and Ben on, and they kind of chalked it up to beginner's luck, but obviously they were doing something right.
Yeah. I hope they are able to breed their. They have a melanistic female that I'm really hope they're able to breed, because I think that's super cool. I don't really like the albinos that much, but I think the solid black Easterns are really, really cool animals.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was in the States until they brought it on.
Yeah, they're really expensive too, so I'm going to wait. I really just want hets. Like, I would like to have a het male because it's kind of a visual het. A for the visual trait, because the visual trait's super cool, and B because those animals probably have some genetics that aren't really in our bloodlines right now.
How did that come over? Do you know?
They came from Malaysia, so
okay.
They came from Malaysia, which is the new German portal. Used to be stuff would pop up in Germany, now stuff is popping up in Hong Kong. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife is not happy about it. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife is watching blue-tongue skinks very carefully, which sucks because Don Patterson has some of the coolest blue-tongue skinks in the world, but I can't get them because U.S. Fish and Wildlife will seize them. Oh. Basically, they had a not official rule, but an informal letter from the Australian government that said, hey, we never let these things go. If you start seeing these coming into your ports, they're not legal. So, even the Northerns that have
generalization, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Australia closed in the late 70s, early 80s, and
I guess the
black ones popped up in like the mid 2000s. How did that happen? But at the same time, there's records of blue-tongued skinks being taken out of Australia in the 50s. Shinglebacks can actually go back and forth, from what I understand. I've never tried, mostly because I don't have I don't want to spend $10,000 on a single shingleback.
Is Casey Lazick still the only one who's keeping those or producing? I remember he produced them a few years back, but I haven't followed up on it.
I think there's a couple of people that are working with the shinglebacks. I think they're kind of hush hush about it. That and shinglebacks, they only breed like every other year, every couple of years, and they only have 1 or 2 babies.
And they're paired for life, right?
And they're very like tightly knit in the way they breed. So yeah, and I think some people were actually a little upset with Casey because he bred 2 subspecies of shinglebacks together, and people weren't happy about that. And
is it kind of one of those you can get what you can get kind of things?
I think it's one of those things where in the future we're either going to have hybrid shinglebacks or no shinglebacks, just because they're not coming in. You know, they might come in every once in a while. You might be able to get some pure Asper, which are the eastern type of the shinglebacks. But I mean, I really think it's shinglebacks. Just take what you're going to get, because A, they're not going to be for sale much, and B, they're not coming in.
Yeah, I mean, those are awesome animals. It's one of those animals that I feel like so many people have on their bucket list that we're never going to be able to get.
Yeah, the Australians say they're the best pet lizard.
Really?
You talk to Australians, they'll say, yeah, that's by far the best pet lizard.
And I know that blue tongues, have a lot more popularity over there than they do over here, right?
That's an availability thing, I think. They've really had a big rise in popularity. Northerns are more popular here than they are over there. Easterns are really the more popular ones, and then they also the U.S. blue tongue skink hobby is very anti-hybridization. Even if you're breeding a northern to an eastern, they're distinct some people say they're distinct subspecies. I think we need to do some DNA work before we say that for sure, based on what we've seen with carpets. But yeah, people are very anti-breeding an eastern to a northern in the U.S., probably for good reason, versus in Australia, where almost every pet quality blue tongue skink you see is going to be some kind of an intergrade.
Right. So that they're like corn snakes over there.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I was so worried about breeding my Easterns when I know for a fact that there's like middle schoolers that have bred Easterns over in Australia. So I'm like, oh, these are so rare over here. I'm so scared. I hope I'm doing it right. And then I realized, like, yeah, this is like a school project for 5th graders in parts of Sydney, you know?
Yeah, but it's still awesome that, people are starting to appreciate an animal that hasn't been worked with, an awful lot.
Yeah.
At least over here.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. I still don't think many people really care about them. I mean, you can go on my Instagram and you'll see, like, my Bredli's Python pictures have, like, 100 likes, and then I'll post a picture of a blue tongue skink, and it's, like, 30-something.
But I feel like maybe even if the general public hasn't caught on 100% yet, I feel like a lot more breeders. Just 5 years ago, I feel like probably when Brian Barczyk started talking about getting blue tongues.
Yeah, definitely.
Breeders definitely started to get collections. And then, I haven't seen an awful lot of success from that, but I feel like I see more and more people with them.
They're harder to breed than I think a lot of people thought they would be. They're very violent breeders. They'll straight up bite each other, and if they bite each other the wrong way, when I was trying to breed my Westerns, my female was extremely aggressive towards my male. And he at one point just bit her in the head, and he was trying to lock up with her, and I had to separate them. And I was so torn, because on one hand, like, Westerns aren't super common in the US at all by any stretch of the imagination. So I was like, oh, if I get these guys to lock up, that'd be awesome. But I also at the same time didn't want him to like slip the wrong way and either like crush her cheek or some of her skin or take an eye out. So I had to separate them, and she wanted nothing to do with them afterwards. I did get one lock from them this year, so I was excited to see that. But I don't know. I kind of am not as hopeful with them as I am with my pair of Easterns I tried.
And do you have to watch them? Does courting happen rather quickly?
Yes.
If it can happen?
Yes, definitely. Basically what'll happen is the male will just run over and bite her and just kind of like manhandle her around. And you can tell when it's consensual. Let's put it this way. It looks like something that's very inconsensual until you see a female that wants no part of it, and she'll try to kill your boy.
Oh, damn. See, the weird thing is like king snakes do that, right? But
Yeah.
females never really show defensive nature towards the male.
If the female is receptive with the blue tongues, she's not going to be. She'll like wiggle her tail and pretend to run away, but she'll like run 3 steps and stop and kind of look at him and wiggle her tail at him, like you got to chase me, dude. But if she's not feeling it, she'll either turn around and just bite him in the head, or she'll like run at him with her mouth open. So it's very, very, it's very nerve wracking.
Yeah, it seems like it adds an extra layer to it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I mean, you would think it would be hard to have a big colony of these and watch, every single one of them.
That's part of the reason why I kind of decided not to really expand much. There's still a couple things in blue tongues I think I'd like to get. I feel like I probably should get a male Hypo Eastern just for like A, breeding diversity, and C, like I think people would want to buy them, and I think they're really cool looking. So I probably should get a boy one of those. I wouldn't mind getting maybe some of the Tannenbar Island ones, which are known for being really mean. So maybe I don't want those. And I really think it would be cool to get some of the alpine animals, some of the blotched, which are basically the diamond python of the skink world. They're from the more highland areas of South Australia, and they go into Tasmania. They're beautiful animals. They're jet black except for these white blotches down their back. They're either white, yellow, or orange. And I think there's kind of all of that look in the U.S. right now.
That's awesome. And are they generally same husbandry, same breeding, stuff like that? Or
they're like a diamond python. I think there's only really 1 or 2 guys in the U.S. that have cracked their code, but there's a lot of people in Australia that have bred them because they just keep them outside in pens. Like I really think that if you just figure out how to cool them down the way people cool down diamond pythons, I don't think it'll be that bad. I think people are just afraid to take, because they're a very rare animal. They're like 2,500 to 3,000 a piece. They would be pretty hard to breed. The other big thing about blue tongues is you can't tell what sex they are. It's very hard to do.
Oh, no.
So, you got to buy like 4 or 5 of them. So if you want to buy 4 or 5 of something when it's $100 each is not bad. But when you're talking about some of these animals, there's only like 2 guys breeding them and they're $3,000 a piece. Good luck.
Yeah. And does it become more apparent with age, or are you throwing animals together and seeing how it goes?
Depends on the subspecies. Like there's some Australians that can look at an Eastern and be like, yeah, okay, that's a boy, that's a girl. I posted up pictures of my Key Islands, and I disagree with everybody saying what they are. Like, and you'll have people like, oh, that's a boy, that's a girl, that's a boy, that's a girl. So I think there's people that can tell like Northerns and Easterns, but I think it starts falling apart when you get to, especially some of these animals from like Papua New Guinea.
And what are the telltale signs, I guess, if you were to assume one's gender via visual inspection?
I'm terrible at it, I'll tell you that, man. I know the females usually have like a smaller head versus a male, which is more of like a pointy head. Usually they'll say that a male is more of like a streamlined body, and the female is more of like she's got more bulk towards the back end of her. There's guys that say that males have longer tails than females, but what really needs to happen is that Benson Morrill needs to get a DNA test going so we can actually do what parrot breeders do, which is just take a little sample and just get the doctor to tell us what it is, because it's just not an exact science. And even guys in Australia will tell you, like, I can tell you the right thing 4 out of 5 times, but if you're right 4 out of 5 times, it means you're wrong 1 out of 5 times, which is pretty significant when you're trying to sell somebody a pair.
Right. And I mean, theoretically, would you be able to tell via shed?
I mean, I guess if there was a DNA test, you'd be able to.
Yeah.
I've had guys tell me you can pop them. I'm bad at popping snakes, so I don't even want to try to pop a skink.
Yeah, I can imagine how you would do that.
Yeah, I don't want to try. So.
And I mean, you can't probe them?
No, I don't think so. I think people have tried that. There's some people that say a couple of species, you can take a flashlight and you can shine it on the back of the tail and see if you see hemipenes through that. But there's a lot of people that say they have a trick, but there's nobody that's 100% right. So how good's your trick if you're not right 100% of the time?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could see now why people don't have as much success, because you don't even know if you have a pair.
Exactly. Yeah. So you start seeing animals that are super expensive like that, and you realize like I don't have to breed. I don't have to buy 2 of them. I have to buy like 5 or 7 of them, just to statistically I have a girl and a boy.
Was that kind of your method when you got into them?
So yeah, a little bit more so with my my Key Island animals. I bought 4 of them just right off the bat because statistically speaking, I think you have like a 12.5% chance or something. I don't know. I'm bad at statistics. Please don't do my math here, people.
I'm not going to do it. Someone else may, but I trust you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just tried to get a group big enough that I could end up with a boy and a girl.
Mm-hmm. And you said you have some Easterns that you're pairing up. Are there any products in particular? Any like project? I don't know if there's morphs or anything.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to get the I-band animals going with some more genetic diversity. I'd really like to do that. I'd like to get, there's some Brisbane locality animals in the U.S., and out of that, a recessive hypo popped up. I think I'd really like to get one of those to play around with. I'd like to get some het melanistics at some point, but I feel like that'd be pretty far down the road. And I don't know, really just more genetic diversity in my group is kind of what I think I'd like to really nail down.
And you're pairing some of those guys together now?
I paired some up in January. So on the 1 pair of Easterns I tried, I got 4 locks with them. And I'm about 54 days out. Gestation period is somewhere between 90 and 134 days. So I'm still not sure if she's gravid. She's been hugging the warm end of her cage, which is a very good sign. Oh yeah, I can see you're pulling up some blue tongue skink stuff.
Yeah. So is this the Hypo Brisbane?
Yeah, that's a Hypo Brisbane right there. I think that's TC Houston has a Hypo Brisbane animal.
Yeah, it's a cool animal.
Yeah, I think those are really, really neat. I'd like to have a male. I don't want to produce visuals, at least not for a little while. I'd like to just kind of outcross that and make some hets. So I can at least infuse some new genetic diversity into that morph, because again, it's kind of a family ladder versus a family tree situation.
Right. And is there any or have you had success yet with any blue tongue skinks, or is this your first year?
Oh no, this is my first year. So it's possible my female's gravid. Like I said, she's hugging the warm end of her cage, which is a very good sign. She hasn't gone off food or anything. I'm starting to weigh her now just to see if maybe she gains a little bit of weight across the weeks. But I did everything I can do, is the only way I can put it. I got them down to the low 50s. I warmed them up. I fed them. I got them to breed. So it's really up to them. Like, I did everything right. It's just they're either going to go or they're not.
And have you dealt with live babies before?
No, this will be my first time. I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome.
So it's cool because I feel like I figured out Bredli's pythons, So Bredli's pythons has really shifted more from like figuring the species out to selectively breeding the species, which happens with all keepers and herpetoculturists. You go from seeing the mystery to what can I do with this now that I figured the mystery out.
Right.
I'm having fun right now going into new species and having a new mystery to figure out, if that makes sense. So right now I've been focusing, really most of my focus this year has been on my blue tongue skinks. And I've also been buying up some northern emerald tree boas. So
whoa.
Yeah. I think those are cool.
Is there any chance that you would sway one side or the other, maybe get rid of Bredlis, or do you always want to have those as
I feel like I should always have some Bredlis. That's my real foundation for learning stuff. It might not be my primary focus forever, but I feel like, a clutch or 2 of Bredlis every year would be a good thing, especially now that people are coming to me because they want my Bredlis.
Right. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny that most people start with a ball python or a corn snake or something. Yeah. You start with Bredlis.
Yeah, I think that's kind of cool too. But and no, that's not to mean that I don't love Bredlis. Like, Bredlis are still my favorite species of python by far. It's just I kind of miss having the mystery.
Right.
You know what I mean? I miss having the whole looking at the female and not really know what's going on. And I still have that to an extent, but I can look at some of my female Bredlis right now and I can tell, like, okay, you look like you're about to start your prelay shed. And with this female Eastern, she shed in the middle of like a month or two after breeding. I'm like, I have no idea what that means. She might have just done that. I don't know. She's hugging the warm end. Maybe she's just happy to be warmed up after brumation, or maybe she's gravid. I don't know.
Right. Right. Yeah. But I mean, it's nice to have a species dialed in, but it's also nice to not exactly know what to expect, try to figure things out again.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Northern Emeralds, man.
Yeah, I have a really.
I mean, obviously, they're obviously a striking animal, but what got you into those?
I've always liked them. I'm not really a green tree guy, but I understand the appeal of green trees. You know, Justin Smith can get mad at me about that.
You can't say you don't like, green trees, whatever, and then have emeralds. I mean, same thing.
Yeah, I think emeralds are they fix a couple of the problems that chondros have, which is they're bigger, they're easier to get started as babies, and there's not a lot of people working with them. I really got into them. If you want to get topical for current events and reptiles, I was sitting at a table with Ian Bissell and Forrest Fanning, and they were saying how there's a lot of people getting into northern emerald tree boas, but they are all taking the risk of getting wild caught in their collection. And the thing about wild caught emeralds is you're really rolling a dice every time you subject yourself to an import. They have a disease where they get a regurgitation syndrome. They can have diseases where you bring one in, all of a sudden your whole collection just crashes and dies. So there's people that have definitely had luck bringing in emeralds and getting them to become long-term captives and getting them to have babies. And I just listened to them hearing how, I think Forrest's exact words were, there needs to be somebody that just won't take that chance. There needs to be somebody that's doing nothing but buying up little babies and raising them up and not even taking a chance with, sup, Justin?
Yeah, so I mean, you have to do kind of the dirty work, and you're the one. You've decided you're the one.
Yeah, I decided I wanted to try to be the one. So I've seen just recently somebody put up a 3-year-old female that was apparently captive born and bred, and I was really tempted to call that person up and say, what do you want for it? But I feel like I need to just focus on getting these captive born and bred babies, or just at least captive born babies that have never eaten a meal in the wild, and just raise them up from little red or little green neonates and then having them become adults. In my care, under my conditions, where I know every meal they've eaten. And again, Justin, I think you're listening here. I can get baby emeralds that were born from a wild caught female to eat frozen thawed the first time I offer them food.
They just may throw it up the next day and do it until they die, but whatever.
That's only if they get they think it's avian chlamydia that makes them do that. So the theory is that if they're in an importer's warehouse or whatever, and they're feeding them parrots that have died from the Amazon as well, that the emerald tree boas will get the chlamydia from those parrots, and then that's where the regurgitation syndrome comes from. That's kind of the current thought process. So you have an animal that is either born in the United States or has born in Suriname and shipped out immediately. You don't really have those problems. So, but that's what you have to do, is you have to accept the fact that I'm going to be spending more money on an animal that might not breed until it's 6 years old versus trying to take a shortcut with them.
Right. And I mean, those animals aren't cheap, right? Definitely in comparison to imports.
No. They're like $500 to $700, where an import can be like $250 to $350. So like it's definitely, I understand why somebody would be tempted to get a wild caught, especially a wild caught subadult or a wild caught adult female or something like that, because we're reptile people. We want to take shortcuts.
Right. Now there's a whole bunch of green tree python versus emerald talk going on in the chat.
They're the superior green snake on a stick. You can say what the superior Morelia is, but the superior green snake on a stick is clearly the emerald tree boa.
I can't get past that head. There's something about it that seems misplaced for me.
I love the head.
Morelia, I think the green tree is nice and sleek, and I think it looks great. The emerald, I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
It's out of place. The head's too big and weird.
I am a little afraid of their teeth, though, because their teeth are gigantic. And
that's also a fair point.
Yeah. I definitely am very cautious when I do handle my emeralds. A lot of people say northerns are mean, but again, they're people that are bringing in wild cots. So I haven't really noticed mine are like any meaner than like a baby Bredl's. But, I only have, a couple at my house right now, and I'm going to have a few more coming in, hopefully in the next couple months. I think I have like kind of a plan for what I'd want to do with those guys in the future. And it all revolves around me just getting these little babies and doing the hard work of, I actually have to spend that initial extra $300. I have to do that initial, I have to raise them up from little red babies into bigger green snakes that might not breed until they're 6 years old. But, going back, I talked about the how I'd like to have, like, say, red team, blue team, purple team. I'd like to have, like, 5 male northern emeralds and then 15 females. So then 1 year I can do this 5 the next year, then this 5, and then the cycle repeats. Because northern emeralds and emeralds in general, and really tree bows in general, you have to skip a year, at least a year, maybe 2 years.
Yeah, so
he dominated Bredli. He's got crosshairs on the real Corrales.
So
that's pretty funny.
Are you interested in any of a particular project within northerns? I know there's a few different things.
I love the anaconda phase. A lot of people try to breed northerns for high white, but I think the anaconda phases are the coolest ones. And then I've got some that I'm kind of.
Those are like, sorry, I just wanna like elaborate. They're the ones like the light green with the darker green pattern.
Yeah, so they have they're the light green, and instead of having white spots, their white spots kind of just shrink down so little that they only have, because with northern emeralds, they're kind of a light green, and then there's like a darker green outline on their white spotches. So with these ones, the white spotches are just gone, and they only have the either really dark green or kind of like aquamarine bluish dots on them. Yeah, there's a good picture of them.
Yeah, man,
I think those look so cool.
Is really cool. Liz, I didn't really get it, but from this perspective and that particular animal, or like this one down here, I mean, yeah, that's top notch.
That's so cool, isn't it? And then I've got some more that are going to be coming in soon where they have these little black spots on them. So
like a mite phase, but an
a little bit like a mite phase chondro. So it's pretty subtle right now, but I think as they grow up, I've seen some melanistic emeralds that have popped up. They're just Hispanic chondro.
Yeah, but I've
seen melanistic emeralds, and they look really cool. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe these babies in a couple of years, once they start getting older, they'll get really, really black. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and James Lewis in the chat, he breeds Boas, and I guess he made a good point with your method is the fact that like live bears should probably get that year off. I mean,
yeah, they should get a year or two off, definitely, because it takes so much out of them, and they have to hold the babies for so much longer.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have any interest in some of the high white stuff, or?
I mean, I totally get some. I'd get some Miss Willie line stuff, no doubt. Especially if I want to have a group that large, which it's going to take me years. It might take me 10 years to get a group that big. So, there's room for me to have like a really high white male and then like 2 or 3 really high white females, and then, reduced patterned animals and anaconda phase animals and high black ones. So there's a lot of room for, diversity in there.
Any interest in basins?
I don't get basins.
How dare
I hate to say it, like
that.
They're cool and they're big, but I don't get why they're so overhyped to northerns, other than the fact that they can't come in. That, and I'm not a stripe guy, to tell you the truth. Like, just in snakes in general, there's guys that like lose their mind when something has a dorsal stripe, and it doesn't do anything for me. The only basins I've seen, I might actually I actually take that back. I probably would get like a pair of Basins, but not the white striped ones. But Gary Schiavino, he has some really, really old Basins. And when Basins get old, they start turning like an aquamarine blue color, and they're beautiful. Yeah.
Is that like
when they're like 14 or 15? I mean, it's probably like humans going gray. Like, I don't think they're born with it, but like when they start getting really old, they start turning blue, which is pretty awesome.
You just gotta wait 15 years.
Yeah, you gotta wait 15 or 16 years, and then they'll turn blue.
But I mean, I've heard that they're a larger animal, right? And they're a little bit more.
I think they're darker too. I wonder if that's because they're more captive bred, though, as far as the demeanor goes.
Right.
Because, like I said, my Northerns don't really seem to be that mean. There's definitely tricks to holding them and getting them to eat. I've noticed a lot of people have problems getting Northern Emeralds to eat, especially as babies. And the trick that I've found that really works is if you have a frozen thawed fuzzy, you got to get it super hot. Like, you put it in water that's not boiling, but it's definitely steaming. And then you just put it in front of them, and they'll just kind of do that thing where they just kind of open their mouth and just take it down. They don't really strike aggressively. At least mine don't. But I have a very small sample size, so I might be wrong about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you feed them at night, or are they kind of like chondros that turn on at night?
But again, we'll talk to Justin Smith here. I believe in his fuzzy cutting method, because I definitely do that, and it definitely helps. So
let's explain the fuzzy cutting method.
Where if you put little slits in the hide of a mouse, especially for young snakes, they're able to digest it a little better. The digestive enzymes are able to break through the hide of the mouse, and they'll be able to digest it a little bit better. So my thoughts are, since emeralds are theoretically so predispositioned to throw up, any little thing has got to help. Right. Even if mine don't have the avian chlamydia disease, they still might throw up. I don't know. So I try to feed them smaller meals every 2 weeks. So again, it's going to take me forever to raise these things up. It's not going to be a quick process at all.
Yeah. So it's weird. The first time I saw the slitting the pinkies is, I believe it's Connie Hurley. She does corn snakes, and she did a study on slitting different pinkies and absorption rates and all this. And the corn snakes who had the slit pinkies were growing a lot more.
Yeah, I believe it.
And then I guess I thought to apply that to chondros, but that's not really a unique thing, because I actually talked to this guy who works at the pet store down the street, which sounds like an unlikely place to find someone who worked with Trooper Walsh in
that's crazy.
in the 90s at some point. But he was telling me that back in the day with chondros, they were already doing that. So I don't know whether that was a popularized method at that point, but so that's not the first time that's crossed over from what he told me.
Yeah.
And it's funny that I have a guy who lived with Trooper Walsh and knows Rico and all that stuff, who works at a pet store literally like a few blocks from here.
I found out Rico lived 45 minutes away from me pretty recently. So I'm really upset that I'm not older, right. Especially now that I'm actually getting into the tree boas and stuff. Oh my gosh, man, I could have learned so much from Rico. Like, he was just a couple towns above me. He lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then supposedly he lived in Dahlonega, Georgia, which is not far. Neither one of those are far away from me.
Oh, so I didn't realize that you were so close to Tennessee in Georgia.
Yeah, I'm about like a 2.5 hour drive from Tennessee, Chattanooga at least. So yeah, I'm in North Georgia.
Gotcha. I guess you don't really hit up many shows, do you?
I've never been to the show except for Daytona, which I did with Billy Hunt last Daytona. Billy Hunt's a super cool guy. But
we'll
I don't
have him on at some point. We've been meaning to have.
Yeah, you gotta have him on. Billy's a super cool guy.
We need to get him on a loan.
Yeah, he's trying to get me to move to Tampa and be his like partner in Morelia down there.
Hey man, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not, but I'll come visit at least. I love Florida. Like, Florida is one of my favorite places in the world. I go down to Florida pretty often. I love how it's not freezing cold there in the wintertime, except for Southeast Carpet Fest, which got pretty darn cold in the
I know.
nighttime.
I was waiting to be there for the summer weather, and it wasn't there. At least my what I would consider summer weather.
Yeah, but I don't know. But going back to the snakes growing larger from having the cut belly stuff, I actually did an experiment with my first clutch of Bredlis, where I would weigh the snake, then weigh the mouse, and then weigh the snake after it pooped the mouse out. And I did that for like 350 meals for all of them. So I was able to figure out that they grow, like, snake weight increases by about 40% of what the mouse weight was every meal.
Wow.
And that lines up pretty well with some experiments people did with Burmese pythons. And I think somebody did some experiments with ball pythons. And they pretty consistently that if you feed a snake 100-gram mouse or 100-gram rat, it's going to gain about 40 grams in its growing stage.
Wow.
So I'd like to try to do some where I do it with the slit ones.
Right.
To see if that changes anything, because I actually have that data.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that the at least the idea behind it in corn snakes, and I guess would still apply to chondros and stuff like that, is the fact that for whatever reason, digesting the hair and the skin of the mouse may be different from the babies who typically eat lizards. And maybe, I don't know, it just helps them digest it better for whatever reason.
I mean, they definitely have a hard time digesting some of the hair. I mean, hair is undigestible to begin with. But have you ever fed a python a bird? You ever done like a chick or something like that?
Maybe to my olive, because I had quail and chicks at one point, but I don't remember.
They have a very hard time digesting the feet of a bird. If you look through like the poop of a snake, it's kind of gross. It's really like sloopy poop if you feed a snake a bird, but they have a very hard time digesting the feet.
And that is,
I don't know why that popped up, but
yeah, I mean, I've even seen when I feed my king snakes, which you would think that they would digest very well because they're naturally, inclined to eat snakes. Sometimes I would get some like skin, or I guess it would be scale. I don't know, but sometimes I get some undigested snake parts in there, which I thought was interesting. Like, maybe that's not a bad thing. I'm not sure.
I mean, it gives them a little roughage. You just gotta help there be some consistency. But I don't know. I recently watched the Crocodile Hunter episode where he went to Komodo and he dug through the Komodo dragon poop and found the little claws from the baby Komodo dragon the giant adult Komodo ate. So there's some stuff they just don't digest well. And I guess that just reigns true for any animal at all. There's no benefit to digesting hair because there's no nutrients in hair. So why waste the energy to digest hair?
Like corn.
Yeah, exactly. There's no reason to try to digest a corn shell. So just.
So that's a good place to end this 2-hour conversation.
Yeah, great. Corn.
You did it. Yeah. So yeah, is there anything that you're looking forward to in the future of whether it's breeding projects, all that stuff that people should keep an eye out for?
Hopefully I'll be having some Bredlis clutches coming up in the next couple of weeks, and I'd be really excited if I managed to breed at least Eastern blue-tongue skinks. Like I said, my Westerns bred once, so maybe I'd get some baby Westerns. That'd be awesome, but one breeding is less hopeful than 4. Right. But,
well, yeah, I have faith in you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'll get them one day. It might take me a little while, but I'll get them one day. Instagram, Cannon Fire Reptiles. You can kind of watch me there. You can look at me on Facebook as Casey Cannon. I don't really have a Cannon Fire Reptiles Facebook page that I use. I used to, but I found out that Facebook doesn't really show as many people stuff if you share from your page, so I just stopped. So I just use my name.
Perfect. And I'm going to I shared your post today if anyone wants to go check that out, as well as I'll probably when I put this episode out, I'll put some information for you and stuff like that down in the description. So check that out. I can't talk now after like 2 hours of this. Apparently.
Yeah, it's all good, man.
Theportcitypythons.com, Port Pythons Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. You know where to find us. Casey, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, cool, man.
All right. Have a good one, guys. We will catch you next
too.
week. All right. So I'll be on with you.